The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 7. Now I saw in my dream that Christian went forth not alone, for there was one, whose name was Hopeful, being so made by looking upon Christian and Faithful in their words and behaviour in their sufferings at the fair, who joined himself unto him, and entering into a brotherly pledge, told him that he would be his companion. Thus one died to show faithfulness to the truth, and another rises out of his ashes to be a companion with Christian in his pilgrimage. This Hopeful also told Christian that there were many more of the men in the fair that would take their time and follow after. So I saw that quickly after they got out of the fair, they overtook one that was going before them, whose name was By Ends. So they said to him,
"What countryman, sir?"
And how far go you this way?
He told them that he came from the town of Fair Speech, and he was going to the Celestial City, but told them not his name.
"From fair speech? Are there any that be good live there?"
"Yes,"
said By Ends.
"I hope.
"Pray, sir, what may I call you?"
I am a stranger to you, and you to me. If you be going this way, I shall be glad of your company. If not, I must be content."
"This town of fair speech, I have heard of it, and, as I remember, they say it's a wealthy place."
"Yes, I will assure you that it is, and I have very many rich kindred there."
"Pray, who are your kindred there, if a man may be so bold?"
"Almost the whole town, but in particular, my Lord Turnabout, my Lord Timeserver, my Lord Fair Speech, from whose ancestors that town first took its name. Also Mr. Smoothman, Mr. Facing Both Ways, Mr. Anything, and the parson of our parish, Mr. Two Tongues, was my mother's own brother by father's side. And to tell you the truth, I am become a gentleman of good quality. Yet my great-grandfather was but a waterman, looking one way and rowing another, and I got most of my estate by the same occupation."
"Are you a married man?"
"Yes, and my wife is a very virtuous woman, the daughter of a virtuous woman. She was my Lady Faining's daughter. Therefore she came of a very honourable family, and is arrived to such a pitch of breeding that she knows how to carry it all, even to prince and peasant. 'Tis true we somewhat differ in religion from those of the stricter sort, yet but in two small points. First, we never strive against wind and tide. Secondly, we are always most zealous when religion is well dressed and goes in his silver slippers. We love much to walk with him in the street if the sun shines and the people praise him."
Then Christian stepped a little aside to his fellow Hopeful, saying,
"It runs in my mind that this is one By Ends of fair speech, and if it be he, we have as very a knave in our company as dwelleth in all these parts."
Then said Hopeful,
Ask him. Methinks he should not be ashamed of his name.
So Christian came up with him again, and said,
"Sir, you talk as if you knew something more than all the world doth, and if I take not my mark amiss, I deem I have half a guess of you. Is not your name Mr. By Ends of fair speech?"
"This is not my name, but, indeed, it is a nickname that is given me by some that cannot abide me, and I must be content to bear it as a reproach, as other good men have borne theirs before me."
"But did you never give an occasion to men to call you by this name?"
"Never, never. The worst that ever I did to give them an occasion to give me this name was, that I had always the luck to jump in my judgment with the present way of the times, whatever it was, and my chance was to gain thereby. But if things are thus cast upon me, let me count them a blessing. But let not the malicious load me therefore with reproach."
I thought indeed that you were the man that I heard of, and to tell you what I think, I fear this name belongs to you more properly than you are willing we should think it doth.
Well, if you will thus imagine, I cannot help it. You shall find me a fair company keeper, if you still admit me your companion.
If you will go with us, you must go against wind and tide, the which I perceive is against your opinion. You must also own religion in his rags as well as when in his silver slippers, and stand by him too when bound in irons, as well as when he walketh the streets with applause.
You must not impose or lord it over my faith. Leave it to my liberty, and let me go with you.
Not a step further, unless you will do in what I declare as we do.
Then said By-ends,
I never desert my old principles, since they are harmless and profitable. If I may not go with you, I must do as I did before you overtook me, even go by myself, until some overtake me that will be glad of my company.
Now I saw in my dream that Christian and Hopeful forsook him, and kept their distance before him. But one of them, looking back, saw 3 men following Mr. By-ends, and behold, as they came up with him, he made them a very low bow, and they also gave him a compliment. The men's names were Mr. Hold-the-World, Mr. Money-Love, and Mr. Save-all, men that Mr. By-ends had been formerly acquainted with, for in their boyhood they were schoolfellows, and taught by one Mr. Gripe-man, a schoolmaster in Loughgane, which is a market-town in the county of Coveting, in the north. This schoolmaster taught them the art of getting, either by violence, cheating, flattery, lying, or by putting on a pretence of religion, and these 4 gentlemen had learned much of the art of their master, so that they could each of them have kept such a school themselves. Well, when they had, as I said, thus saluted each other, Mr. Money-Love said to Mr. By-ends,
Who are they upon the road before us?
For Christian and Hopeful were yet within view.
They are a couple of far countrymen that, after their mode, are going on pilgrimage.
Alas, why did they not stay, that we might have had their good company? For they, and we, and you, sir, I hope, are all going on pilgrimage.
We are so, indeed. But the men before us are so rigid, and love so much their own notions, and do also so lightly esteem the opinions of others, that, let a man be ever so godly, yet, if he agrees not with them in all things, they thrust him quite out of their company.
That is bad. But we read of some that are righteous overmuch, and such men's rigidness makes them judge and condemn all but themselves. But I pray, what and how many were the things wherein you differed?
Why, they, after their headstrong manner, conclude that it is their duty to rush on their journey all weathers, and I am for waiting for wind and tide. They are for taking the risk of all for God at a clap. I am for taking all advantages to secure my life and property. They are for holding their notions, though all other men be against them. But I am for religion in what and so far as the times and my safety will bear it. They are for religion when in rags and contempt. But I am for him when he walks in his golden slippers, in the sunshine, and with applause.
Ay, and hold you there still, good Mr. By-ends, for my part, I can count him but a fool, that, having the liberty to keep what he has, shall be so unwise as to lose it. Let us be wise as serpents. It is still best to make hay while the sun shines. You see how the bee lieth still all winter, and bestirs her only when she can have profit and pleasure. God sends sometimes rain, and sometimes sunshine. If they be such fools to go through the rain, yet let us be content to take fair weather along with us. For my part, I like that religion best that will stand with the safety of God's good blessings unto us. For who can imagine that is ruled by his reason, since God has bestowed upon us the good things of this life, but that he would have us keep them for his sake. Abraham and Solomon grew rich in religion, and Job says that a good man should lay up gold as dust. But he must not be such as the man before us, if they be as you have described them.
I think that we are all agreed in this matter, and therefore there needs no more words about it.
No, there needs no more words about this matter indeed, for he that believes neither Scripture nor reason, and you see we have both on our side, neither knows his own liberty nor seeks his own safety.
And so these four men, Mr. Byends, Mr. Moneylove, Mr. Save-All, and old Mr. Hold-the-World, walked on together, while Christian and Hopeful were far in advance. Then Christian and Hopeful went on till they came to a delicate plain, called Ease, where they went with much content. But that plain was but narrow, so they were quickly got over it. Now at the farther side of that plain was a little hill, called Lucre, and in that hill a silver mine, which some of them that had formerly gone that way, because of the rarity of it, had turned aside to see. But going too near the brink of the pit, the ground, being deceitful under them, broke, and they were slain. Some also had been maimed there, and could not to their dying day be their own men again. Then I saw in my dream that a little off the road, over against the silver mine, stood Demas, gentlemanlike, to call to passengers to come and see, who said to Christian and his fellow,
Ho! Turn aside hither, and I will show you a thing.
What thing so deserving as to turn us out of the way?
Here is a silver mine, and some digging in it for treasure. If you will come with a little pains, you may richly provide for yourselves.
Then said Hopeful,
Let us go see.
Not I.
said Christian.
I have heard of this place before now, and how many have there been slain, and besides, that treasure is a snare to those who seek it, for it hindereth them in their pilgrimage.
Then Christian called to Demas, saying,
Is not the place dangerous? Hath it not hindered many in their pilgrimage?
Not very dangerous, except to those that are careless.
But withal he blushed as he spake. Then said Christian to Hopeful,
Let us not stir a step, but still keep on our way.
I will warrant you, when Byends comes up, if he hath the same invitation as we, he will turn in thither to see.
No doubt thereof, for his principles lead him in that way, and 100 to 1 but he dies there.
Then Demas called out again, saying,
But will you not come over and see?
Then Christian roundly answered, saying,
Demas, thou art an enemy to the right ways of the Lord of this way, and hast been already condemned for thine own turning aside by one of his Majesty's judges. And why seekest thou to have us condemned also? Besides, if we at all turn aside, our lord the king will certainly hear thereof, and will there put us to shame, where we should stand with boldness before him.
Demas cried again that he also was one of their company, a pilgrim like themselves, and that, if they would tarry a little, he also himself would walk with them.
What is thy name? Is it not the same by the which I have called thee?
Yes, my name is Demas. I am the son of Abraham.
I know you. Gehazi was your great-grandfather, and Judas your father, and you have trod in their steps. It is but a devilish prank that thou usest. Thy father was hanged for a traitor, and thou deservest no better reward. Assure thyself that when we come to the king, we will tell him of this thy behaviour.
Thus they went their way, but by this time Byends and his companions were come again within sight, and they at the first beck went over to Demas. Now, whether they fell into the pit by looking over the brink thereof, or whether they went down to dig, or whether they were smothered in the bottom by the damps that commonly arise, of these things I am not certain. But this I observed, that they were never seen again in the way. Then sang Christian,
Byends and Silver Demas both agree. One calls the other runs, that he may be a sharer of this lucre, so these two take up in this world, and no further go.
Now I saw that just on the other side of the plain the pilgrims came to a place where stood an old monument hard by the highway side, at the sight of which they were both concerned, because of the strangeness of the form thereof. for it seemed to them as if it had been a woman changed into the shape of a pillar. Here, therefore, they stood looking and looking upon it, but could not for a time tell what they should make thereof. At last Hopeful espied written above, upon the head thereof, a writing in an unusual hand. But he, being no scholar, called to Christian, for he was learned, to see if he could pick out the meaning. So he came, and after a little laying of letters together, he found the same to be this, Remember Lot's wife. So he read to his fellow, after which they both concluded that that was the pillar of salt to which Lot's wife was turned, for her looking back with a covetous heart when she was going from Sodom. Which sudden and amazing sight gave them occasion for speaking thus.
Ah, my brother, this is a seasonable sight. It came just in time to us after the invitation which Demas gave us to come over to view the hill Lucra, and had we gone over as he desired us, and as thou wast inclining to do, my brother, we had, for aught I know, been made ourselves like this woman, a spectacle for those who shall come after to behold.
I am sorry that I was so foolish, and am made to wonder that I am not now as Lot's wife. For wherein was the difference betwixt her sin and mine? She only looked back, and I had a desire to go see. Let God's goodness be praised, and let me be ashamed that ever such a thing should be in mine heart.
Let us take notice of what we see here, for our help for time to come. This woman escaped one judgment, for she fell not by the destruction of Sodom. Yet she was destroyed by another, as we see. She is turned into a pillar of salt.
What a mercy is it that neither thou, but especially I, am not made myself this example. This gives reason to us to thank God, to fear before him, and always to remember Lot's wife.
I saw then that they went on their way to a pleasant river, which David the king called the river of God, but John the river of the water of life. Now their way lay just upon the bank of this river. Here, therefore, Christian and his companion walked with great delight. They drank also the water of the river, which was pleasant and enlivening to their weary spirits. Besides, on the banks of this river on either side were green trees that bore all manner of fruit, and the leaves of the trees were good for medicine. With the fruit of these trees they were also much delighted, and the leaves they ate to prevent illness, especially such diseases that come to those that heat their blood by travels. On either side of the river was also a meadow, curiously beautified with lilies, and it was green all the year long. In this meadow they lay down and slept, for here they might lie down safely. When they awoke, they gathered again of the fruit of the trees, and drank again of the water of the river, and they lay down again to sleep. This they did several days and nights. Then they sang,
Behold ye how these crystal streams do glide, to comfort pilgrims by the highway side. The meadows green, besides their fragrant smell, yield dainties for them, and he who can tell.
What pleasant fruit, yea, leaves, these trees do yield! We'll soon sell all, that he may buy this field.
So when they were disposed to go on, for they were not as yet at their journey's end, they ate and drank and departed. Now I beheld in my dream that they had not journeyed far, but the river and the way for a time parted, at which they were not a little sorry. Yet they durst not go out of the way. Now the way from the river was rough, and their feet tender by reason of their travels, so the souls of the pilgrims were much discouraged because of the way. Wherefore, still as they went on, they wished for a better way. Now a little before them there was, on the left hand of the road, a meadow, and a stile to go over into it, and that meadow was called Bypath Meadow. Then said Christian to his fellow,
If this meadow lieth along by our wayside, let's go over it.
Then he went to the stile to see, and behold, a path lay along by the way on the other side of the fence.
It is according to my wish,
said Christian.
Here is the easiest going. Come, good Hopeful, and let us go over.
But how if this path should lead us out of the way?
That is not likely,
said the other.
Look, doth it not go along by the wayside?
So Hopeful, being persuaded by his fellow, went after him over the stile. When they were gone over, and were got into the path, they found it very easy to their feet, And withal, they, looking before them, espied a man walking as they did, and his name was Vain Confidence. So they called after him, and asked him whither that way led. He said,
To the celestial gate.
Look,
said Christian.
did I not tell you so? By this you may see we are right.
So they followed, and he went before them. But, behold, the night came on, and it grew very dark, so that they that were behind lost sight of him that went before. He, therefore, that went before, Vain Confidence by name, not seeing the way before him, fell into a deep pit, which was on purpose there made by the prince of those grounds to catch careless fools, withal, and was dashed in pieces with his fall. Now Christian and his fellow heard him fall, so they called to know the matter, but there was none to answer, only they heard a groaning. Then said Hopeful,
Where are we now?
Then was his fellow silent, as mistrusting that he had led him out of the way. And now it began to rain, and thunder, and lighten in a most dreadful manner, and the water rose again. Then Hopeful groaned in himself, saying,
Oh, that I had kept on my way!
Who could have thought that this path should have led us out of the way?
I was afraid on't at the very first, and therefore gave you that gentle caution. I would have spoken plainer, but that you are older than I.
Good brother, be not offended. I am very sorry I have brought thee out of the way, and that I have put thee into such great danger. Pray, my brother, forgive me. I did not do it of any evil intent.
Be comforted, my brother, for I forgive thee, and believe, too, that this shall be for our good.
I am glad I have with me a merciful brother, but we must not stand still. Let us try to go back again.
But, good brother, let me go before.
No, if you please, let me go first, that if there be any danger I may be first therein, because by my means we are both gone out of the way.
No, you shall not go first, for your mind being troubled may lead you out of the way again.
Then, for their encouragement, they heard the voice of one saying, Let thine heart be towards the highway, even the way that thou wentest. Turn again. But by this time the waters were greatly risen, by reason of which the way of going back was very dangerous. Then I thought that it is easier going out of the way when we are in, than going in when we are out. Yet they undertook to go back, but it was so dark, and the flood so high, that, in their going back, they had like to have been drowned 9 or 10 times. Neither could they, with all the skill they had, get again to the stile that night. Wherefore, at last, lighting under a little shelter, they sat down there until daybreak, but being weary, they fell asleep. Now there was, not far from the place where they lay, a castle, called Doubting Castle, the owner whereof was Giant Despair, and it was in his grounds they now were sleeping. Wherefore he, getting up in the morning early, and walking up and down in his fields, caught Christian and Hopeful asleep in his grounds. Then, with a grim and surly voice, he bid them awake, and asked them whence they were, and what they did in his grounds. They told him they were pilgrims, and that they had lost their way. Then said the giant,
You have this night trespassed on me, by trampling in and lying on my grounds, and therefore you must go along with me.
So they were forced to go, because he was stronger than they. They had also but little to say, for they knew themselves in fault. The giant therefore drove them before him, and put them into his castle, into a very dark dungeon, nasty and smelling vilely to the spirits of those 2 men. Here then they lay from Wednesday morning till Saturday night, without one bit of bread or drop of drink, or light, or any to ask how they did. They were, therefore, here in evil case, and were far from friends and people whom they knew. Now, in this place Christian had double sorrow, because it was through his thoughtless haste that they were brought into this distress. Now Giant Despair had a wife, and her name was Diffidence. So when he was gone to bed, he told his wife what he had done, to wit, that he had taken a couple of prisoners and cast them into his dungeon for trespassing on his grounds. Then he asked her also what he had best to do further to them. So she asked them what they were, whence they came, and whither they were bound, and he told her. Then she advised him that when he arose in the morning he should beat them without any mercy. So when he arose he getteth him a grievous crab-tree cudgel, and goes down into the dungeon to them, and there first fell to abusing them as if they were dogs, although they never gave him a word of distaste. Then he falls upon them and beats them fearfully, in such sort that they were not able to help themselves, or to turn them upon the floor. This done, he withdraws, and leaves them there to sorrow over their misery, and to mourn under their distress. So all that day they spent their time in nothing but sighs and bitter grief. The next night she, talking with her husband about them further, and understanding that they were yet alive, did advise him to tell them to make away with themselves. So, when morning was come, he goes to them in a surly manner as before, and perceiving them to be very sore with the stripes that he had given them the day before, he told them that since they were never like to come out of that place, their only way would be forthwith to make an end of themselves, either with knife, halter, or poison.
For why,
said he,
should you choose life, seeing it is attended with so much bitterness?
But they desired him to let them go. With that he looked ugly upon them, and rushing to them, had doubtless made an end of them himself, but that he fell into one of his fits, for he sometimes in sunshiny weather fell into fits, and lost for a time the use of his hands, wherefore he withdrew, and left them as before to consider what to do. Then did the prisoners consult between themselves whether it was best to take his advice or no, and thus they began to discourse.
"Brother,"
said Christian,
"what shall we do? The life we now live is miserable. For my part, I know not whether it is best to live thus or to die out of hand. My soul chooseth strangling rather than life, and the grave is more easy for me than this dungeon. Shall we be ruled by the giant?"
Indeed, our present condition is dreadful, and death would be far more welcome to me than thus for ever to abide. But yet, let us think. The lord of the country to which we are going hath said, Thou shalt do no murder. No, not to another man's person. Much more, then, are we forbidden to take his advice to kill ourselves. Besides, he that kills another can but commit murder upon his body, but for one to kill himself is to kill body and soul at once. And moreover, my brother, thou talkest of ease in the grave, but hast thou forgotten the hell, whither for certain the murderers go? For no murderer hath eternal life. And let us consider again, that all the law is not in the hand of giant Despair. Others, so far as I can understand, have been taken by him as well as we, and yet have escaped out of his hand. Who knows but that God, who made the world, may cause that giant Despair may die? Or that, at some time or other, he may forget to lock us in? Or that he may, in a short time, have another of his fits before us, and he may lose the use of his limbs? And, if ever that should come to pass again, for my part, I am resolved to pluck up the heart of a man, and try to my utmost to get from under his hand. I was a fool that I did not try to do it before. But however, my brother, let us be patient, and endure a while. The time may come that may give us a happy release, but let us not be our own murderers.
With these words, Hopeful at present did calm the mind of his brother. So they continued together in the dark that day, in their sad and doleful condition. Well, towards evening, the giant goes down into the dungeon again to see if his prisoners had taken his counsel. But when he came there, he found them alive, and truly alive was all. For now, what for want of bread and water, and by reason of the wounds they received when he beat them, they could do little but breathe. But, I say, he found them alive. At which he fell into a grievous rage, and told them that, seeing they had disobeyed his counsel, it should be worse with them than if they had never been born. At this they trembled greatly, and I think that Christian fell into a swoon. But coming a little to himself again, they renewed their discourse about the giant's advice, and whether yet they had best to take it or no. Now Christian again seemed for doing it, but Hopeful made his second reply as followeth.
My brother,
said he,
rememberest thou not how valiant thou hast been heretofore? Apollyon could not crush thee, nor could all that thou didst hear, or see, or feel in the valley of the shadow of death. What hardship, terror, and amazement hast thou already gone through, and art thou now nothing but fear? Thou seest that I am in the dungeon with thee, a far weaker man by nature than thou art. Also, this giant has wounded me as well as thee, and hath also cut off the bread and water from my mouth. And with thee I mourn without the light. But let us have a little more patience. Remember how thou showedst thyself the man at Vanity Fair, and wast neither afraid of the chain, nor cage, nor yet of bloody death. Wherefore, let us, at least, to avoid the shame that it becomes not a Christian to be found in, bear up with patience as well as we can.
Now, night being come again, and the giant and his wife being in bed, she asked him concerning the prisoners, and if they had taken his advice, to which he replied,
They are sturdy rogues. They choose rather to bear all hardship than to make away with themselves.
Then said she,
Take them under the castle yard tomorrow, and show them the bones and skulls of those that thou hast already killed, and make them believe, ere a week comes to an end, thou wilt tear them also in pieces, as thou hast done their fellows before them.
So when the morning was come, the giant goes to them again, and takes them into the castle yard, and shows them as his wife had bidden them.
These,
said he,
were pilgrims, as you are, once, and they trespass in my grounds, as you have done. And when I thought fit, I tore 'em in pieces, and so within 10 days I will do you. Go, get down to your den again.
And with that he beat them all the way thither. They lay therefore all day on Saturday in a lamentable case as before. Now when night was come, and when Mrs. Diffidence and her husband the giant were got to bed, they began to renew their talking of their prisoners, and withal the old giant wondered that he could neither by his blows nor counsel bring them to an end. And with that his wife replied,
I fear,
said she,
that they live in hope that some will come to relieve them, or that they have picklocks about them, by the means of which they hope to escape.
And sayest thou so, my dear?
said the giant.
I will therefore search them in the morning.
Well, on Saturday, about midnight, they began to pray, and continued in prayer till almost break of day. Now, a little before it was day, good Christian, as one half amazed, brake out into this earnest speech.
What a fool,
quoth he,
am I to lie in a foul-smelling dungeon when I may as well walk at liberty? I have a key in my bosom called Promise that will, I am sure, open any lock in Doubting Castle.
Then said Hopeful,
That is good news, good brother. Pluck it out of thy bosom, and try.
Then Christian pulled it out of his bosom, and began to try at the dungeon door, whose bolt, as he turned the key, gave back, and the door flew open with ease, and Christian and Hopeful both came out. Then he went to the outward door that leads into the castle yard, and with his key opened that door also. After he went to the iron gate, for that must be opened too, but that lock went exceedingly hard, yet the key did open it. Then they thrust open the gate to make their escape with speed, but that gate, as it opened, made such a creaking that it waked Giant Despair, who, hastily rising to pursue his prisoners, felt his limbs to fail, for his fits took him again, so that he could by no means go after them. Then they went on, and came to the king's highway again, and so were safe, because they were out of Giant Despair's rule. Now, when they were gone over the stile, they began to contrive with themselves what they should do at that stile to prevent those that should come after from falling into the hands of Giant Despair. So they agreed to build there a pillar, and to engrave upon the side thereof this sentence: Over this stile is the way to Doubting Castle, which is kept by Giant Despair, who despiseth the king of the celestial country, and seeks to destroy his holy pilgrims. Many, therefore, that followed after, read what was written, and escaped the danger. This done, they sang as follows.
Out of the way we went, and then we found what 'twas to tread upon forbidden ground, and let them that come after have a care, lest heedlessness make them as we to fare.
Lest they for trespassing his prisoners are, whose castle's Doubting, and whose name's Despair.
End of Part 1, Chapter 7.